And I always say to any agency, much as they hate doing the start of any process, always ask if there's procurement, because you're better off doing it then rather than, as you said, you've got appointed and you've got to sit at a table. But I think sometimes I think if you're sitting at a table with a procurement person, you're probably the selected supplier, the selected agency. Why do you have to negotiate? But I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of agencies out there. It's an oversupply market. It's a global marketplace. So for every agency that will say no, it's someone that will say yes. So it's very hard for agencies. But I think, like my first point, if you learn how to play the game and talk their language, that's half the battle.
Hey Louise, heb je deze mop al gehoord? Een agency founder en een procurement manager lopen een café binnen. De agency founder zegt, ik bestel wel iets, wat wil jij? De procurement manager zegt, wacht even, ik heb nog geen purchase order ingediend en ik moet eerst 3 offertes vergelijken en de strategische waarde van alcohol onderbouwen. Naar het schijnt wachten ze nog altijd op hun eerste biertje.
Hilarisch, Robin. Jij bent echt
Hilarisch, hè?
moppetapper.
Ja.
Ik vind het wel een beetje een cheap shot om procurement zo te zitten afkraken.
Dat is misschien terechte kritiek. En ik denk dat onze gast van vandaag het met je eens zou zijn. Tina Fegent werkt namelijk al 35 jaar in marketing procurement. Ze bouwde procurement teams op bij grote merken, werkte daarna als onafhankelijk consultant en lanceerde recent de Marketing Procurement Awards om de mensen die het goed doen in de kijker te zetten.
Want hier is een ongemakkelijke waarheid voor bureaus. Als je de taal van procurement niet spreekt, dan ben je niet premium, dan ben je een risico.
De vraag is dus, hoe bouwen bureaus een betere relatie op met procurement?
Dat gaan wij uitzoeken in deze podcast. Na de reclame die jij hier nu live en ambachtelijk gaat inspreken, Robin.
Dat klopt, Louise, want voor onze allerliefste sponsor doen we niet aan vooraf ingesproken bandjes. En die sponsor is uiteraard Teamleader Orbit. Als je je cijfers niet kent, kan je je waarde niet verdedigen. Zo simpel is het. Daarom brengt Teamleader Orbit je sales, projecten en financiën samen in één systeem, zodat je onderhandelt vanuit harde feiten en niet vanuit je buikgevoel. Surf naar teamleader.be/orbit of .nl/orbit en vraag je gratis assessment aan. Welcome, Tina. Can you tell our listeners in Belgium and the Netherlands a little bit about yourself?
Hello, nice to meet you both, and hello to everyone listening. I'm Tina Fegent, one of the first marketing procurement people. So I started my career 35 years ago, and then since then I've worked agency side, client side. I've run my own consultancy for the last 20 years. And as you kindly said in the intro, moving towards sort of looking at sort of future-proofing marketing procurement, and we've launched the Marketing Procurement Awards, the inaugural Marketing Procurement Awards, to celebrate the great buyers that exist out there. So thank you for asking me to be on your podcast today.
Let's get the obvious question out of the way first, Tina. Why do agencies fear procurement so much?
I think they fear them because they see them as cost cutters, tactical cost cutters, rather than what I would like to see as value drivers, as strategic enablers. I think agencies don't often know how to speak procurement language. I worked agency side 25 years ago because the CEO at the time thought how insightful to, I wouldn't say fight fire with fire, but have someone that speaks procurement's language. So I do think that actually if agencies can learn to speak procurement language, they can help reframe the work they're doing, be it creative or social or, insights in terms of areas that agencies want to talk about: outcomes, risks, managing efficiency. And at the end of the day, it's invested in the marketing budget to make work that works. So actually it's making that measurable return as well. So I think it's fear, and I think it's also language.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And do you think maybe this fear is also based on just having a bad experience with some procurement people?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I wouldn't say 100% of marketing procurement people are those strategic enablers. I think, you only have to look at the economic climate that's got quite taxed in the last couple of years. Actually, 2 years ago, if you ask my marketing procurement colleagues, were they targeted to save money? 10% said yes. I would say probably 80% have now got cost savings as a target. There are ways of doing that. It's not always going straight in and getting the lowest price. But definitely I agree. It's based on that one experience. But I would say try again. reshape how you have those conversations and reshape how you're framing the work that you're doing for that client. But try and speak procurement's language, understand what they're trying to get.
We've heard in this podcast from agency people the claim that, well, agencies are just quite bad at procurement, that they usually get, how do you say that, they get to the table with procurement specialists and they lose the battle every time. That's what people tell us. Is that rooted in truth?
I think it depends on the relationship between the procurement person and the stakeholder. I think I've seen a few instances where procurement have called the shots and make the decision based on cost savings, and invariably 6 months, a year later, they end up going back to the previous supplier because the decision was based purely on cost and not for the other reasons. So I do think it's important for marketing procurement people to have a relationship with their budget stakeholders, and I think for any agency, to have that alignment and have that check-in at the start of a process is always good, to see the relationship between the two. Because at the end of the day, the money, the budget sits with that stakeholder, be it that head of PR, be it that head of advertising, be it that head of digital. And procurement is an enabler, puts the process in place to help select the process, to help manage the agencies, for example. And I always say to any agency, much as they hate doing the start of any process, always ask if there's procurement, because you're better off doing it then rather than, as you said, you've got appointed and you've got to sit at a table but I think sometimes I think if you're sitting at a table with a procurement person, you're probably the selected supplier, the selected agency. Why do you have to negotiate? But I think, unfortunately, there's a lot of agencies out there. It's an oversupply market. It's a global marketplace. So for every agency that will say no, it's someone that will say yes. So it's very hard for agencies. But I think, like my first point, if you learn how to play the game and talk their language, that's half the battle.
Yeah. And is it also then a matter of talking to procurement sooner and maybe avoiding that they come at the last moment after you've already been building on the relationship for months? Should agencies proactively ask to speak to procurement much sooner?
Totally. I totally agree with that 100%. I think procurement should be targeting them in their marketing, in terms of actually, whilst you're targeting that head of PR, that head of advertising, you should be also thinking about engaging with procurement, because obviously you often can do that long list to begin with. So I think definitely in your marketing efforts. And then, I totally agree that if you get involved in any process, I would always ask if there's a procurement person, and then you can understand who they are, what their experience is. Are they an experienced marketing procurement person, or perhaps will they buy in direct materials last week and have come in to do this? Have to look them up on LinkedIn. Do any of your agency friends know them from experience? Like, oh yeah, we're pitching for client X. Oh, I know that my agency friend round the corner has worked with them. So, as you would do any other person in terms of who you're engaging with. So yes, definitely engage with them as soon as you can. There might not be procurement, but it's better to find out and work with them throughout the whole process.
Okay. We've talked about speaking procurement's language, and that not all agencies are good at that. What does that mean exactly? What is this language that we're talking about?
I think it's understanding the role of procurement, as well as, and in that is their language. So how are they operating? What is the pitch process? What are cost savings? What are efficiencies? So at the end of the day, we're all working to invest in growth. If you're an agency, you want to come up with that next idea, whatever it is, to, hit that what your client's target is. Invariably they're going to be growth of, their share price, their product, their brand image, etc. And obviously procurement is cut from the same cloth in terms of those financial, language. Often marketing procurement reports into the finance team, the finance director. So we're always going to have that commerciality around it. And I do think agencies sometimes need to be a bit stronger in terms of procurement's language is the commercial side. So understanding what are they talking about, that accountability, to be transparent, but to look at how, we can put the right structures in place that would deliver the right ideas, that would deliver value for the marketing budget.
Yeah. One thing you have talked about in our pre-calls was the defensive agency. You said that most agencies walk into procurement conversations defensively. Now, what does that actually look like?
And that can be many forms. So it could be that they're over-explaining or under-explaining, but trying to justify their pricing, and not really working with procurement. It's, and they're doing that at the start before you've even questioned them. It's like, well, why are you doing that already? Because as anything, you see someone walking past your house with a balaclava on, you're like, why are they wearing a balaclava walking past your house? So I do feel that early doors, before knowing what the procurement person's going to ask or procurement team's going to ask, there is that being defensive, the over explaining, and it just creates tension early on. And actually you're coming across as an adversary straight away more than a partner, which is obviously, again, the 70%. The good ones want to see procurement and good agencies as partners.
So you said that some agencies they over explain and they already go into the conversation with sort of like a negative bias. Then on the other hand, there are probably also agencies who are in denial and who avoid procurement. How does that work?
Well, I do say to creative friends, not everyone has got procurement people. So, I suppose in one way, if you can avoid procurement, if they don't have procurement, and you've got a direct relationship with the marketing stakeholders, then that's good for the agency. But where there is procurement, I think going to the first point about knowing their language and just working from them from the start, wait to see what they ask. You don't have to go, there is an element of being proactive. I understand that. But I think, the over explaining, the over justification, the 100-page deck before you've even asked for it, you're thinking, I think, how does the procurement person see it? And I think often agencies don't put themselves in that position. They were making assumptions. And as you said, a while ago, it could be based on one bad experience. Well, everyone's cut differently. People work differently. Organisations have different targets. And it's understanding that situation and really just getting the lie of the land to understand, where they're coming from, what pressures they in their organisation. Were they in the news last week? They've got to, save 25% because they've merged with someone else. Understanding that and knowing where they're coming from and having those conversations.
So as a procurement person, you're not looking for a 100 slide deck. What are you looking for? What are the key things that you need from an agency to feel confident to move forward with the conversation?
The main thing for me is respect for the procurement role, because I think agencies often don't have that respect, maybe based on that one experience you said. And I do think, the good ones are absolutely brilliant and can build and can really help them, because, we move up, we move sideways, we move different companies, and you want to be able to be seen as a good, a good support of procurement, because actually when you're often doing pitch lists, procurement is there in the beginning in doing that. So I think it's having that, for me, it's having respect for the role. Everyone should have respect. And then I think it's communication, making sure, maybe someone loves a 100-page deck. I don't, but, if it's to the point, I much prefer things that are to the point and factual, for example. So I do think respect for the procurement role, and then making sure that you communicate at the right level. Don't under-communicate and don't over-communicate.
Okay.
Is there a sort of negative proactivity from the agency side where they're like expecting it to be difficult, so they avoid a simple question, simple communication with the procurement people?
Invariably, I would have thought there are, based on their experiences and resource. A lot of agencies are small companies, aren't they? And and it's ideally, my view is, you have someone who's a procurement person, because actually, if you've got someone who's a procurement person in your agency, what the procurement person, what the trends are. Do you know what they're talking about in terms of the impact of AI, on the impact of enumeration models and moving to output models, and on the trend of, decoupling of production? So I think, I always say, if you're a bigger agency, you should invest in having that procurement insight, and it should be one person. Often it's spread. You go to an agency and you say, okay, what procurement experience have you got? And it's spread across 5 account managers. So they're not even consolidating their experiences of dealing with procurement. Because actually, if you've gone through a process and you've done some great documents for client X, or you've done some great reporting in management information, why aren't you sharing it? You've done it on client X, but you can do it on client A, B, C, and D. So I think in an ideal world, if you're a big enough agency, why not recruit someone who concentrates on being that procurement person, or in the instance, at least consolidate that and have someone who's a procurement point person within your agency.
Okay. I have another question. At Teamleader, we do research called the agency benchmark. It shows that agencies give away 5 to 10% of their margin due to weak negotiation in the process. What do you think of that number?
Well, it's not very nice to hear, because everyone's got to make money in the process. At the end of the day, magic and logic, which is a study done over 20 years ago in the UK by SIPS, our trade body for procurement, the IPA, the trade body for agencies, and ISBA, the trade body for clients, did a study which was magic and logic, that agencies and marketing love magic, but where's the logic, and end of stage left procurement. And the strap line on that is, to create good ideas that basically everyone profits from. The agency earns that money. In a way, that's why the old commission system many years ago worked well, because actually the more the work was put on air, put on radio, the agency got 50. So yeah, I'm not a fan of asking for agencies' profit margins and overheads in any negotiation. Part of me thinks it probably is weak negotiation, because there are a lot of agencies out there. And as I said earlier, for every agency that says, no, I'm not doing it for that, there is another one that will say yes. And that's very tough. And agencies say yes for a number of reasons. That particular sector, that client. And I think it's very hard for agencies to say no. Many will over accommodate to win or retain business. But I think a thoughtful, it takes guts to say no, but I think a thoughtful no, and the reasons why at the right time, does show a quiet confidence, and actually I think sometimes does earn more respect in the long term. So, but I would say agencies do need to invest in training, and I think they do need to invest in negotiation training, and make sure, again, the role is not spread out amongst everyone that's an account manager, but maybe again, when it's founders, I think that can be easier. But I think, in the medium-sized agencies, actually, should it probably be the MDs or the client partner managers, for example. But I do think agencies do need to invest in negotiation training, because no one should have to give away their margin.
Mm. Was that better in the past? Were agencies usually better at negotiating earlier in your career?
Was it better? I mean, in the past, the agencies have probably made a lot more money. I think, we are in a much more transparent era now, and especially, stuff like the media world. Was it easier? No, I don't think so. I think, it's never, negotiation is never easy. I don't particularly enjoy it half the time. But at the end of the day, you need to do a good job for the client and make sure you're getting the best return, and getting to that point where you feel you're getting a good return. And it's up to the agency to go with you along that journey to prove that, they are at a place where, you've got the right scope of work, you've got the right team, and they are comfortable with what they're making. At the end of the day, if an agency, sadly, is a weak negotiator and negotiates to a certain point, they have to live with that decision, and that's very hard. It's very hard, but ultimately, I worked for an agency quite a few years ago, where we did let ourselves get negotiated right down. But the issue is everyone in the agency knew it, so there was no goodwill. The client probably got the bare minimum, but we as an agency had responsibility for that. We allowed that negotiation to happen for whatever reason. But everyone in the agency knew it and was very negative about the client. So it's never a great position for anybody. But that's the agency's job, to prove the value and to be able to manage at the level they say they want to manage.
let's talk about let's going from being transactional to actually building a client to agency partnership, because that's what we hear a lot. That's how the best agency client relationships work, when they have something to offer for the both of them. And the same with procurement. The goal should be to go from transaction to a partnership. But say you're already in a fee negotiation and it's going badly, how can we recover that transactional dynamic, and can you?
Yeah, I think you can. For me, building that partnership, and it's not a term that we use lightly within procurement, is about transparency. So, what has gone wrong in that negotiation? Why is there a weak negotiation? Are you being transparent to the level you can negotiate? Being consistent in your message and your approach and how you do that. Doing what you said you were going to do. And it's surprising the number of agencies that don't follow through on stuff. If you say you're going to follow through and do X and Y, then make sure you do that. And I think, at the end of the day, it's about creating the great work. At the end of the day, you want that. So you want to be able to make sure that, you come back from that bad negotiation and show that you are the best agency for that job, for both the client and for the procurement person. So it's then building that trust. I think that's if you come back from bad negotiation, but you still, you've been appointed and you're working with them, it's making sure. And I think procurement can be quite bad at, they've done the pitch, they've done the selection process, then the agency doesn't see them again. And I think, I encourage any procurement people that I work with to have quarterly reviews with the agencies, to have those business reviews. We call them quarterly business reviews, QBRs, because you want to build that trust. And actually that will allow the agency then to have to, be able to get in front of the procurement person and have that confidence, and then share the pressures, share the issues. Because as we know, clients do have quite high demands a lot of the time, with pressure on budgets as well. But having those, quarterly check-ins as a minimum, I think does build up that dialogue, builds up that communication, and ultimately I think you can then start to rebuild and build that trust.
Mhm.
What do you never say or do when a negotiation is going south?
I think, what do you never say or do? What do you never say or do? That's a really good question. I think what I would say is that agencies need to be more considered, and if you need to take time out, to take that time out, even if you're doing it online, to say, look, and I've had an agency do that last year, B2B pitch. I was working on a global one. They just sort of said, can we just have 10 minutes? We're going to sort of go off camera and mute ourselves. So I think it's more about what they can do. I think don't be browbeaten or sort of scared by the process. I think I'd probably sort of turn it around that way and say, don't be afraid to ask for time out on the call or that. I think the other thing, the one thing they probably don't do, thinking about it, is bring in the decision makers. I think it's very hard to have a negotiation with someone who can't make a decision, hence my point a while ago about working with founders, because they can make the decisions. So I think that's probably the one thing I would say, thinking about it, that agencies don't do, is have decision makers, because we want to get it over and done with from a negotiation point of view. But if you've got an account manager who is not empowered and has to keep going back and check, that is really frustrating. So that's probably the one thing I say that agencies don't do and probably should do, is have the decision makers involved in the process.
Okay. We talk a lot on this podcast, and everyone in the agency land does, about new pricing models, moving from hourly based fees to value based models to performance based models. What's your vision on that from the procurement side? Are
Well,
procurement people also making this shift?
no. I said this just one the other day, is it's a very internal agency dialogue. I mean, if you look at the different remuneration models out there, in the UK, the IPA did a guide to pricing. I don't know how old it is. It's probably 20 years old. And at that time, there were 14 different models then. The IPA also has just released last week their pricing playbook with some models in there. For me, there's an agency CEO, he's one of our judges in our awards, who said to me many, many years ago, he was a founder of his agencies. He's created 2 agencies. He's bought and sold, and he's sold both of them. I've got 40 different clients, I've got 40 different agency models, and I've got 40 different remuneration models. I think agencies are very fixated on this. We can drive value, we want to be paid by output. But if they're not being transparent in the first place, it's very, very hard to do. Agencies should be remunerated for the work they do. And in the one way, that's why I'm quite a fan of the old commission system, because obviously if it was great work that ran, both the creative and the media agency, taking the advertising example, got rewarded for it. For me, there are multiple remuneration models, and there always has been, and there always will be, from commission, project fee, retainer, performance-related fee, subscription service. There are a multitude, and I think you have to get the right pricing model that's in place for the right client, and every client is different. I think agencies spend too much time looking internally themselves and hoping for stuff that will happen, as opposed to having those dialogues to say, look, this is one thing we'd like to talk about, in that can we look at having an element of value-based, and then you say to the agency, okay, how are you going to do it? We haven't really thought it through. So if you want to propose these new models, it's not procurement. We're open to look at different options, as long as there are different options, as long as you can back it up. So, okay, if you want value, how are you going to measure it? Well, we don't know about that. So if you want to look at, but there are a multitude, there's, I don't know, there's probably 16 different remuneration models out there, and it's getting the right ones, but it's having the baseline to begin with, which some of that is down to the client as well, because you want the KPIs and the SLAs, and you need the metrics to do that. I mean, I'm a huge fan of performance-related fee, which, has been around for years and years, and you often see it in terms of media agencies, but I do think it's a place, and that is, and when I worked agency side, we had it with a well-known UK retailer, and it was brilliant. We earned 30% on it because we were focused on what that was, what the measures were. We had monthly, quarterly reviews from it. And it goes back to the question a while ago about talking the procurement language and knowing what language. It's the commerciality. If you want value-based pricing or any different remuneration model, you need to be talking the language of the client, which is driving growth. And to have that, you need to be commercially aware. And I think that is an area alongside negotiation where agencies could invest in, being more aware of a client's profit and loss sheet and what they're doing from that point of view. And then you can have the conversation about remuneration models.
Mhm. Okay. So actually, if I understand correctly, you're not necessarily a fan of looking at hourly fees either, but your point is that when you use the other models and when you want to talk about value, you have to be prepared to prove that value.
I mean, our hourly rates are the basis of a conversation, and I do buy the argument that agency always says that, you don't ask that of a lawyer or stuff like that. Well, they all have hourly rates in terms of that. But yeah, I am a fan of what's the value of an idea. Because actually, if someone comes up with it now, and I do that in my own consultancy. I'm a consultant for 20 years. I probably did start off doing hourly, or I probably did daily rates. Whereas now I say it's a fee. I know my worth and my experience. So I'm a fan of all the remuneration models, and I think they've all got a different place for different clients in different relationships. So the trouble is, why procurement keep going back to hourly rates is because agencies aren't transparent. And you say, well, can you just explain that? And they can't explain it. So how have you, you said you want 50,000 euros for that design work. What's the scope of work? What's behind it? So if they can't describe the value or the output, the resource behind it, that is going to go back to a procurement person and say, well, actually, okay, we'll break it down. To understand who I'm getting, who am I getting for it? And the age-old thing, if you pitch with the A list, but I'm now getting the B list. And that's why we want to see the team and the hourly rates. So it's chicken and egg, really. So it's having that level of transparency in terms of the construct of the proposed fee to then build from that to say, right, we then can drive value. And actually, if we deliver some work and the car sales are off the shelf, why shouldn't we get rewarded for it? And I think good clients will say, yeah, I agree with you, but it's getting those bases right in the first place.
Let's talk about the internal game of procurement. So this idea that agencies can be allies in making procurement look smart to their own leadership. Because, procurement, of course, has its own management to impress. Is it part of the agency's job actually helping procurement look good upstairs?
Yes, I suppose in one way, if you've gone through a process, or you're managing the supply base, you want the best suppliers. You've invested all that time and effort. So I do think that good agencies can help procurement sell in, can help do an internal companion tell story. And interesting, for the awards, we actually had quite a few agencies enter with their clients, but they actually, thought, well, this is a great thing because actually we've got some great stories to tell. So we have got some finalists that are led by the agency together with the client. So it's been fantastic. So I think, yeah, if you do make procurement look smart from a sort of commercial point of view, and also that procurement are in control of their supply base, I think you become part of their success, and they know it. They then move up, they move sideways, they move companies, and they think, oh, I remember agency X, that they work really well with us. They really did help us build that compelling internal story, where we delivered great results, all working together in partnership. Oh, I'll consider them for my next project. So I think, again, invest in the long term, looking at Les Binet and Peter Field in terms of marketing investment, the long and short of it, think of how you build that relationship up with your procurement people. I did some work for an agency last week who have launched a marketing procurement community. Great idea. And I've been saying that for 20 years for agencies that I've come across, is why not have your own marketing procurement club, and get your marketing procurement clients in on a quarterly basis and hear the creative director speak, or hear the influencer speak, or hear about metrics, for example. And it's surprising number of agencies that don't do that. And that's both with existing clients, but also with new procurement clients. It's a great selling point as well. It's quite hard for procurement to get out, don't have budget for a lot of conferences. So if you can get them in an area where you can educate them, then that's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, and of course, procurement people, they move around as well, just like CMOs and just like agency folks. So if they can take you along to their next job, that's a win for all parties.
Correct. Yeah.
And knowing that Tina
Indeed.
had foreseen 45 minutes for us.
Right. So Tina, one last question. If you had to pick one thing that agencies should do differently in their next procurement conversation, what would that be?
It's a great question, and for me is respect the role. I think try and put that one bad experience aside. Go in with a positive attitude, that actually embracing procurement, working alongside them in probably the long term will really benefit you. So I think go with a positive mindset, respect what the role is, but also be able to have those conversations to say, actually, that's pushing us a bit far. And I think if you get that respect, it builds that trust. So you then can have that relationship where you can say, well, actually, we can't do this, but we can do that. What if is a powerful word in negotiation? What if we didn't do this? What if we could do that? So I think, respect the role and start to build up that trust with procurement, because I think in the long term, it will serve you well. But understanding where you've got that trust probably gives you the confidence to be able to push back where perhaps you do feel they're pushing a button that you don't feel is fair enough from that point of view. So respect, build up that trust, and be able to have that confidence, I think, are the key things I would probably say.
Okay. Thanks for joining us, Tina. I hope we've helped you build that bridge between agencies and procurement and make it a little bit of a more positive conversation and a positive relationship. Thank you for being here. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did.
I did. Thanks. Very nice to meet you both, and thanks for asking quite challenging questions. And I hope it helps the agencies that listen. To just try and think a bit more positive about procurement, the 70-30, which we said, and engage, with the strategic ones, strategic enablers, if you can have those dialogues with them. But also don't forget, there will be the tactical cost cutters, but just learning how to deal with them in their way as well. So be prepared, but engage with procurement and be positive. So thank you for asking me along today.
Thanks, Tina. Tina's consultancy and the Marketing Procurement Awards are in our show notes. Go and find the good procurement people, the 70%, and make their lives slightly easier.
This was Agency Live. Please subscribe via agencylive.be or agencylive.nl. There's a new episode every 2 weeks.
See you next time.